Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're in chapter 11, Mind and Body. This is Nobles at the Court of Shah Abbas, Persian school. This is the Safavid dynasty in Iran. So the body is personal. This is my body. This is me. The body is social. We study each other. We use our bodies to communicate attitudes, and mind and body are intertwined. So, through art that deals with the mind and body, different cultures show different concepts of the individual as well as human nature in general and larger social trends. Depicting the body. This is Nefertiti in Egypt, 1350 BCE. Portrait bust. Of course, it's in Germany. Depicting the body. So, beyond the likeness of an individual, some portraits represent inner mental states, social preferences, and political issues. Portraits also suggest, or a successful portrait goes beyond simply creating a likeness. The bust of Queen Nefertiti has an individualized, idealized, and perfectly symmetrical face. Nefertiti displays the new aesthetic canon of being at ease and flowing, being natural and elegant. She embodies the ancient Egyptian concept of female beauty. The study of the portrait of Okakura Tenshin records a face that emphasizes inner character. The portrait also mirrors the social, political, and aesthetic controversies in Japan during his time. This is from 1922. Shimimo Mura Kanzen. Study of a portrait of Okakura Tenshin, Japan, 1922. Pigment on paper. So the Japanese-style contour lines and flat shapes in Okakura's left hand and sleeve, the face and hat are rendered with Western chiaroscuro, light and dark shading, chiaroscuro. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. But that's light and dark shading. It's a technique. Okakura believed that only the combination of modernism and tradition meant progress in art. This drawing combines Japanese and Western art styles. So an example of a face rendered in traditional Japanese style with outlines only, Komurasaki of the Tamaya Tea House on the right. The portrait of Dr. Gachet focuses on a person's inner mental and emotional state. This is Vincent van Gogh from the Netherlands, 1890. Oil on canvas. The artist revealed as much about himself as he did about his subject. Portraits can be visual records of inner emotional states. Van Gogh was less than 2 months away from his suicide when he painted this. The thick paint animates the surface. Its emphatic dashes and tight swirls model form. And then there's a color saturation. All indicate Van Gogh's own agitation and intensity. The painting is an image of Gachet and a reflection of Van Gogh's inner state. In Fanny finger painting, Chuck Close used the portrait to create a detailed record of the structure, ridges, pores, and wrinkles of an elderly woman. It says an enormous, and it's oil on canvas, okay? And he painted, it's more than 9 feet. We're going to talk about the Chuck Close method if you take my drawing class in the fall. We're going to do a Chuck Close portrait of ourselves. Hopefully not this intense looking. But she has lizard-like eyelids, watery eyes, cracked lips, and a sagging neck skin. We can stare at a person's face, an action considered impolite in U.S. culture. Faces by Nancy Burson gives us the opportunity to indulge our curiosity about other people's faces. These are photographs of children with unusual faces due to genetic conditions, accident, or disease. 1992. Burson's photographs reveal aspects of personality, friendliness, dreaminess, caution, concern, curiosity, and boldness. Her photographs act as a mirror to the viewers who reveal themselves in the reactions of the images. Lee under the skylight Full body portraits often reveal more about the sitter's personality than just a face rendering. Sitting for long periods of time, subjects unintentionally reveal clues about their most intimate selves, primarily through poses and facial expressions. This is Lucian Freud, Lee Under the Sky, 1994. This full-size nude is definitely a portrait of a particular individual man. Freud's portraits are known for their amazing range of paint applications and for revealing the inner being of his sitters. Compare Lee Under the Skylight to the full-size nude Doryphorus. Here's Bill Viola. He's a video installation artist. Video allows artists to make moving portraits. Bill Viola's Dolorosa shows a weeping man and woman. After a few minutes, we see the subtle changes in their faces expressing a deep, almost unbearable sorrow. Dolorosa is part of the series The Passions, based on Renaissance and Baroque paintings of figures in sorrow, ecstasy, or astonishment. Viola sought to expand their emotional and spiritual dimensions. Self-portraits are representations of the artists created by the artists themselves. All right. This is Rembrandt. I can recall that there is a question on the quiz about how many self-portraits Rembrandt did. So you might want to check that out. I believe it's in the text. You could also Google how many self-portraits Rembrandt did. He painted himself a lot, let's just say that. Rembrandt's self-portraits painted over many decades of his life. They are a record of his pleasures and sorrows. He recorded his face as strong, vulnerable, cloddish, or sophisticated from youth through old age. This is one of his 62 self-portraits. Uh-oh, I gave it away. Rembrandt recorded his face as strong, vulnerable, cloddish, sophisticated, happy, worried, sorrowful, humorous, and resigned. Oh, I think there's another question about Frida Kahlo. Something about this particular slide, I think it has to do with what the monkey represents to her. And in this picture, what do you think? She surrounded her image with symbols of her personal history and Mexican history. Kahlo painted her face many times. I think 55 times, it says. Almost always the same impassive expression. In this particular portrait, the monkey represents her animal spirit. Through her self-portraits, Frida Kahlo expressed her inner and outer being as well as social and political forces. In Self-Portrait with Monkey, Kahlo's face is central. Braided hair shows identification with peasant culture. Lush Mexican foliage appears around her head. And the monkey has her animal alter ego. Cindy Sherman. We kind of talked about her in the beginning, and now it's coming full circle. She did a lot of self-portraits of herself in different scenarios of, like, the female struggle. Hundreds of times she photographed herself, the effect being fragmentation and not a unique individual, right? So she's a bunch of different characters. Each image reflects a socially prescribed or media-disseminated role. Untitled Film Still number 53, Blonde Close-Up with Lamp, is one of a series of 69 fake film stills. Sherman suggests that we have no built-in sense of identity, but rather compose ourselves from pieces of popular culture. This is from 1980. She reenacts roles for women given by the media. The sweetheart next door, the housewife, the girl left behind, and the vulnerable hitchhiker. Mariko Mori creates photographs and performances starring herself in various roles, a geisha or cyber chick, and they're total fabrications. In Birth of a Star, she photographed herself as a teen rock star in a shiny plastic plaid skirt and spiked purple hair, surrounded by computer-manipulated floating bubbles. She translated that image into Star Doll, which was a limited edition doll. Her Star Doll identify as a fabricated hybrid of herself. So it questions, what is self? And this could go on right to your avatar. Very similar. This was 1998. We didn't quite have, we were just starting to have avatars. The physical body. Artists use the body to address ideas about the essence of humanity, as well as cultural ideals. The ideal body. Protagoras said, "Of all things, the measure is man." Ancient Greeks had a great respect for the human mind and body. The Greeks believed humans were capable of perfection, defined as a fit body guided by a keen mind. Emotions were less important than the intellect, and nudity was common in art and athletic events. It glorified the idealized human form. This is in Rome, Doryphorus, spear bearer, 450 to 440 BCE, marble. Doryphorus, or spear bearer, slightly larger than life-size nude that reflects the Greeks' deep appreciation of the human body. The figure is idealized in the balanced pose, in the internal proportions, in the restrained emotions, and in the roles depicted as like a youth athletic warrior. The work was executed in the Greek classical art style. Polykleitos developed a canon of proportions in which each part of the ideal body was in carefully controlled proportion to all other parts. Contrapposto, a counterbalance. This stance is the way many people stand. The sculpture recreates an image of a living, flexing body. That's contrapposto. Compare Zeus to Doryphorus. What are the similarities between the images of gods and humans in Greek classical art? Or how about with the male torso, the ancestral figure carved in the 20th century in Bali area of Africa? In some African traditions, the head and neck were considered the most important body parts. The patterns represented scarification and carefully combed, braided, twisted, or beaded hair. The male torso combines naturalistic and abstracted features. In African art, ideal proportions for the human body were ideally divided vertically, with 1/3 of the head, 1/3 of the torso, and 1/3 for the legs. It had internal proportions, an idealized character, harmony of parts, but also restraint. All are important elements in the male torso. The frontal pose contributes to the dignified, almost solemn aspect of the sculpture. In ancient India, the ideal body had a soft, supple, fluid quality. This stone has been so sensitively shaped that it gives the impression of living flesh, smooth muscle, and a little pad of fat. Torso from the ancient Harappan civilization centered on the Indus River in what is now Pakistan. The sculpture is an idealized version of the human body, possibly a youthful deity. The distended stomach suggests a yogic breathing. The stone has been shaped to give the impression of living flesh, smooth muscle, and a pad of fat. This is from 3000 BCE. Compare and contrast all three of these, huh? Each culture has a different idea of what is considered beauty, right? The ideal female body in ancient India was very well-rounded and remarkably limber. Shocker. Sensuality is an important and central characteristic of human nature. The Yakshi, it's on the Great Stupa, early Andhra period, Sanchi, India, 1st century BCE. Yakshi is a nature spirit who represents fertility. Her breasts are exaggerated and emphasize her powers. Her touch caused trees to flower. Her body is curving and rounded, seen through her transparent skirt. Twists with incredible flexibility, and the belt emphasizes her broad hips in contrast to her small waist. Nobles at the court of Shah Abbas, Persian school, Safavid dynasty, 1588 to 1629. This is a fresco wall painting. Many cultures do not have a tradition of depicting nudes in art, yet even these cultures have representations of ideal human forms. Nobles at the court of Shah Abbas. This beautiful couple represents ideal qualities in youth in the early 17th century Persia. Flawed humanity. The dramatic display of emotion in this sculpture represents a theatrical struggle. Laocoon and His Sons was created when Greek art turned to depicting humans. It engaged in violent action, it was vulnerable to age, it showed the injured and the diseased, it was subject to feelings of pain, terror, or despair. This is the 1st century. It's in the Vatican. Two cults were influential in the Hellenistic era. Stoicism, individuals were urged to nobly endure their fate and state in life, and Epicureanism advocated intelligent pleasure seeking in life because death was at the end of existence. Both imply a resigned acceptance of fate and a withdrawal from classic Greek ideals. Giselberdus, The Last Judgment in France, 1130. It's a stone carving. In medieval Europe, human nature was held in very low esteem. Medieval Christians saw a great split between God's divine realm and the natural world, a place of sin and corruption. The Last Judgment, early Gothic style, from the main entrance of the Church of St. Lazare, is another example of art depicting flawed humanity. Humans are depicted as miserable, frail, pitifully unattractive. The scene illustrates the end of time, when every person rises from the ground to be judged forever as worthy of heaven or condemned to hell. Because human nature was considered so base, the idealized Greek nude was inconceivable, and the idea of the body as beautiful and good disappeared. Dark times, huh? Compare the medieval depiction of the human form with an example from the Renaissance. There is nothing to be seen more wonderful than man. Attitudes about human nature shifted again. Humanistic philosophy celebrated the glory of humanity. Michelangelo believed the human form was the most perfect and important subject to depict. The nude as an ideal form became popular again. When was this? Michelangelo, he did David in the Renaissance era. That could be a question on the quiz, just saying. The body was seen now as a work of God. Michelangelo sculpts David as he first faces Goliath. Tension is apparent in his frown, his muscles, protruding veins. Head and hands are oversized, indicating youthful potential. Inner tension speaks of the core of being and the soul. Body is ennobled and emphasized, but only as a vehicle for the soul. So when did this happen again? 1501 to 1504. Carved it in marble. It's in Florence. I want to see it so bad. But it happened in the Renaissance era, not in the Greek era. Oh, I think this is on the quiz. Yes, it is. I love the title of this piece by Richard Hamilton. It's called Just What Is It That Makes Today's Home So Different, So Appealing? It's a 1956 collage. He's German. In an era of consumerism, people often gauge their worth by the purchases they make, not by the character, deeds, fate, or karma. Body shape becomes something that can be bought as well. In this pop art collage, we see the aestheticized body ideals of the late 20th century. A buff, muscular man, amazing sexual prowess, thin, sexy woman, a fashion model pout. The faces and bodies have been molded through implants, plastic surgery, and the latest ab machine. This work mocks the notion that status can be acquired by purchasing consumer products or by manufacturing an ideal body type for oneself. I mean, this is still going on. We totally still buy into this. The body as the subject of scientific study. This is a Persian anatomical illustration. Akbar's Medicine by Muhammad Akbar. Ink and pigment on paper. Starting with the Renaissance, religious models for human nature held less sway in Europe, and they were challenged and displaced by concepts based on scientific inquiry. This shift was also apparent in artwork. The connection is a famous anatomical study. A famous anatomical study is Andre Vesalius De Humani Corporeis Fabrica. His fourth plate of muscles is an example of European Renaissance scientific studies of anatomy. Growing interest in anatomy resulted in different depictions of the body than those used to reveal religious truths, philosophical positions, or inner emotions. The Persian anatomical illustration shows a pregnant female. She draws back the skin of her chest and abdomen to reveal inner organs. She holds a plant in her hand, which may have been symbolic to her fruitfulness. Muybridge, handspring, a flying pigeon. Edward Muybridge did one of the first moving images. The invention of photography meant that human movement could be stopped and examined. Handspring, a flying pigeon, interfering, a flying pigeon interfering. June 26, 1885 is a study of the human body in action made by Edward Muybridge. The photograph allows artists and scientists to study the mechanics of human movement. Muybridge altered the concept of human body. He was in San Francisco. The limits of the self. In this is the individual person a discrete entity? What are the boundaries between the self and the environment, between the self and the spiritual realm, or perhaps between the self and technology? Many cultures of the South Pacific see the person as an amalgam of life forces, physical substances, and ritual knowledge. This amalgam is always changing, transforming, and also in danger of coming apart. Ritual tattooing was one way of strengthening the individual. Extra eyes gave the tattooed person more power and decreased vulnerability. This is Tomika Te Mutu of Coromandel in New Zealand, 19th century Maori chief. Wow. Tattooing is often part of initiation rites. His tattoos were seen as an extra skin. Unique forms of continuity in space. This is Umberto Boccioni, Unique Forms of Continuity in Space, Italy, 1913. This presents the human figure distorted by external forces and thus continuous with all other forms and energy in space. It has ritual beliefs, scientific discoveries, technological advances in it. All of the above can shape the concept of the human being. The human being is now seen as permeable and an integrated part of the total world. If ritual beliefs can shape the concept of the human being, then scientific discoveries and technological advances can do so as well. Then the body is considered less human. It's kind of where we're at right now, right? AI and everything. It's considered more of a form continuous in space. Its muscle and bulk is implied. It resembles a map of aerodynamic turbulence. Boccioni was part of Futurism. Oh yes, I love that movement. It's another art movement, which celebrated violence, speed, energy, motion, force, and change. The Italians founded it. Unique Forms of Continuity in Space dissolves the conventional belief that the skin defines the body's outer edge. In this sculpture, the body is depicted as a massive wave of energy, defined by its movement through a fluid atmospheric medium. Hannah Wilke, Intravenous, 1992-93. Sickness and Death. Humans become ill and die, and which topics are addressed in art. In Intravenous, it's a series of large-scale photographs of the artist Hannah Wilke as she struggled with the eventually succumbed to cancer. In the 3 panels of Intravenous, Wilke assumes poses derived from images of sexually attractive nudes taken from fine art and from popular magazines. Her glance implies the presence of a sexual partner. She is the object of voyeurism, and her posture depicts narcissistic pleasure. She is Venus, goddess, and love of beauty. Wilke reclaims sexuality for herself in Sickness and challenges conventional ideas of attractiveness. Manuel Alvarez Bravo, Striking Worker, assassinated, 1934. This is a close-up view of death by Manuel Alvarez Bravo. In painting, death can be glorified or idealized. In this photograph, formal qualities are evident. Aesthetic fine points coexist with details of appalling gore. Striking Worker assassinated is a disturbing image, not only for its content, but also because this death is close up and immediate. Psychological dimension in art. Much art is related to the mental or emotional state of humans, work that functions psychologically. Art in which the body is affected by emotional and mental forces, and art that is psychologically potent and affects the mental state of those who view or use the art. Art that acts as a record of a mental or emotional state. That's why we say artists are crazy. Some of them are. It's no joke. It's real. Edvard Munch, for sure. This is the scream. You guys, I feel like this has been parodied the most. Maybe this one and like Van Gogh or something. But you recognize it even if you don't know it was Edvard Munch. It's the scream. It's from Norway. So if you want to go see it, it's in Norway. 1893. There's a Munch museum. Like, I don't know if that's in. I don't know. Anyway, in the scream, the distorted body is the vehicle of expressing inner terror and anxieties and pressures. Realism has been abandoned to give form to these internal emotions. Inner emotional forces have distorted and deformed the head into almost a skull-like form. The figure stands in physical and emotional isolation, screaming at a pitch that reverberates in the landscape and in the sky. Double mask. The Ajagam people cross river in Cameroon, 19th to 20th century, early 20th century. This is wood hide pigment rope beads, 13.75 inches. Okay, so that's not very big. It's like a head, size of a head, I guess. The double mask from the Ahajam people, I'm saying that wrong, of the Cross River area of Cameroon is psychologically active when used, worn, or displayed. The mask is meant to be psychologically potent by giving the wearer extra power and intimidating the audience watching the performance. Compare these two. On the right is the mask of the swan and the white whale. The Inuit people of Alaska are known for their inventive masks that are intended to increase the power of those who wear them in rituals. The Inuit believes the swan leads the white whale to the hunter. During rituals, the wearer of this mask would receive added powers in whale hunting. This is early 20th century. Giovanni Battista Piranesi's prison focuses on the complicated, dreary spaces of the dungeon, which acts as a metaphor for the darker, twisted side of human mind. These complex, dark chambers are the exact opposite of sunny landscapes, but each can be seen as a metaphor for a human state of mind. 1745. Listen to the Living. Roberto Mata Echewarren, Listen to the Living, 1941. It's an example of surrealism. I love it. A movement that emphasized absurd or dream states. What is surrealism? A movement that emphasized absurd or dreamlike states. Just think dream state. Mata Echewarren's paintings are called inscapes. He sought to create an image of the workings of the human mind. Surrealist paintings like this are often intended to be reflections of the unconscious mind and to allude to cosmic forces in life, such as creation and destruction. This work is marked by vivid colors, luminous patterns, bold lines, and a vague, unspecific background. Rothko, Mark Rothko. Yes, he painted color. And I didn't get it until I was probably in grad school for art. I finally understood Rothko. I didn't get it when I was your age and I was in community college and taking these art classes, and I was just like, what? All he did was paint some color. But then you go deep into it when you see one. I think you have to actually see one in real life to feel it. But yeah, so this is meant to record a mental state. This is Mark Rothko, 1955, green, red, blue. It hints at a sublime moment of transcendent state of being. He created a series of paintings that contain large rectangles, sometimes only vaguely defined, against a field of other colors. He used abstraction to address broad and fundamental feelings, ideas, because figurative or narrative imagery was too specific and limiting. Rothko's abstractions were meant to provide a kind of direct physical experience. And it does. It doesn't convey digitally, but it really does in IRL. By painting glowing colors and hovering shapes, the artist hoped to allude to a sublime, transcendent state of being. Rothko has a chapel. I think it's somewhere in Texas. Or New Mexico? I think it's in Texas. The body in art as art. And as art. The body is not only depicted in art, it is used in making art or is transformed to become artwork. Just like the Tomika Timutu in New Zealand, the Maori chief, and then the male torso on the right. The human body is material for art making. It can be painted or sculpted, or it can be part of a performance or spectacle. The living body energizes, personalizes, and adds emotional content to the artwork. In many cultures, body painting is the same as wearing masks or costumes. Body painting is an important art form among some African people. Among the Niger people, girls paint their torsos white and their faces in brilliant colors after initiation, as in the Niger girl prepared for a festival. Africa, late 20th century. The patterns of color are similar to the way the face can be abstracted and broken down into parts of a sculpture. The human body is malleable and can be changed for aesthetic purposes. Many Mayan rulers often flattened the foreheads of their offspring, and hair was cut and sculpted in a dramatic way. This is head from the tomb of the Temple of Inscriptions, Maya, Palenque, Chiapas, Mexico. I think there's something about this on the quiz. Ana Mendieta created several outdoor performances that dealt with her body directly, or the trace of her body on the earth. She made herself into a body sculpture covered with mud and straw. She posed against a tree in a manner reminiscent of ancient fertility goddess. In her performance silhouette, Mendieta covered her body in mud and assumed distinct poses to represent primal feminine forces within her own body. The energy of her living being was joined with the earth, which she believed was a force that was omnipresent and female. I love this. 1977. It's performance art. Oh, she's the queen of performance art. Maria Abramovic, I've heard did gone both ways. The artist is present. There's a documentary on this. I highly recommend you watch it. It's really crazy. It's wild. I had to study her a lot in grad school because she did a lot of very interesting, wild performances. A 736-hour performance where she would just sit across you and people would just start crying. It's insane. You got to watch the documentary. I think it's on Art 21 on PBS, if you can find that maybe on YouTube. Marina Abramovic's work involves pushing the mental and physical limits of her being. Time, actually lived experience, and her own body and her own materials. This is a 736-hour-long piece involved Abramovich sitting immobile in the atrium of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, while museum guests were invited to sit opposite of her for a span of time. The performance created a space of stillness in the crowd, in a crowded, noisy museum, and a sense of slowed down time that was discontinuous with the surroundings. This is Jackson Pollock, the body as an art tool. He moved around the space of the canvas. He painted on the ground, and he dripped paint. His paintings, again, I was like, what's the big deal? He's dripping paint. But then you see one of his paintings, and you can feel him making those drips because it's so much texture, and it's so colorful and so exciting. Yeah, he uses his whole body. He painted Lucifer with the motion of his entire body. Where is this? I want to see this. 1947. This style of painting is called gestural abstraction or action painting. Yes, he invented that. His body movements were fixed and recorded in the paint surface, a rhythmic mesh of drips, congealed blobs, and looping swirls. The action painter was seen as an isolated genius, almost always male. This is true. The work had no moral message and no narrative, just pure paint and pure body action. Oh, and that's it. Okay, I'll see you next chapter.